Good morning, everyone. In this video, I want to talk about how psychic capacity and abilities do develop as you evolve, or as you grow your mind, your consciousness, or whatever you want to call it. People often want to say, I don't see any miracles taking place by these people. They're using the physical world. So it's important to recognize that the physical world has limitations, has laws, or what you see has specific laws. But once you understand why that is, you tend to have the capacity to find loopholes. Now, what those loopholes are rather difficult to talk about. But there are loopholes that correlate to existing energy systems often. So, for example, you hear stories that when people have awakenings, parts of their body literally cut open, whether it be their fingers, whether it be their toes, whether it be marks on the spinal column, because energy did release. That's how you know that there's an energetic reaction. Is it supernatural? Well, kinda. It depends what you factor into scientific laws. Eventually, what we think is spirituality is going to be incorporated as scientific laws by the masses. Right now, most of these types of things are found in Eastern traditions, which tend to have practical relevance for your health. So already we see that spirituality in relation to the supernatural is not so clear-cut. And I don't know how many supernatural things I've seen people do with chi, but with chi, you can actually push the person further if you channel your chi properly. And some want to say, well, you can light things on fire. That's a talent that could take decades. Or, even a few years if you know how to do it. Train yourself well. But the idea is you're taking the existing energies and putting it in your palm and utilizing the laws of nature, finding materials that burn more easily to set things on fire. It is a supernatural ability. It's just an example. Now, are there things that no one else has and no one else has cultivated? For example, levitating things with your mind. So the argument that these things don't exist, I'm not saying that it's true, but the argument that they don't exist is based upon the idea that we haven't seen it. And what I want to say is that the reason why we haven't seen people with powers come out is because if they admitted that they had powers, people would try to screw them over, say, no, you're a fraud, right? They'll try to, because there's a collective standard on what is possible, what is not possible. So even if it was possible, they get screwed over. So of course they're not going to come out and do it. Now, if the person was cultivating it and has some skills and didn't have skills at other times of the day because they needed a certain preparation, what's going to happen is you're going to have people saying you're a fraud or you're a cheat or you just don't know how to do it and you're pretending. Now, sometimes he's successful, sometimes not. To master that art takes time and it's difficult. But more importantly, the reason why it's difficult comes to the core component that I want to talk about in this video. That to master something that goes beyond the regular paradigm involves the subconscious mind factoring in the fear and the accusations of others, such that you need to contact people at a time when they're ready and sense that out. And you need to contact them at a time when you're ready. And there has to be this interplay such that when the person sees it, they don't lower your momentum, even psychically. So how do we know there's a psychic connection between minds? Well, we know there's survival cues. Now, people who are very intuitive, when they sense that the other person's not going to grasp or agree with or adhere to the way in which he's speaking or she's speaking, they're going to say, they're going to have a reaction, and the teacher is going to say, okay, I see that's not the best example. The way people are responding, the way people's expressions are, or the reaction I'm getting from the class. That comes from intuition, but the amount of subtle cues are so detailed and subtle that many people want to call them psychic. And yet professionals, they're not psychic, but they're picking up on cues like the dilation of eyes, or the perspiration of different glands in different parts of the body, because they've been doing this for so long. Or the way they move and the way the coloring changes in different parts of the body, especially the face. So when you have these skills that are honed enough, people will say that they're psychic. But really what's going on is you're tapping into intuition. But what is the difference between supernatural and science. If the scientific possibilities could be honed so well that it seems supernatural. And that's what you get here. You get something that's never supernatural and it's always supernatural. And just because no one has that skill doesn't mean it's not possible. And just because the person can't guess the number each time that you give them, that you say, guess the number, it doesn't mean it's not possible, and it doesn't mean they can't get it half the time. Right? There's an assumption that it's not worth my while unless the power is 100% of the time, all the time. But that takes years of cultivation. So to dismiss the prospect of cultivating skills because you believe that there's like a point in your life, you turn 13, or you turn 28, or you turn 51, where you just get powers like that, that's wrong. No, there may be certain powers that have been honing, and then after you reach a certain age, it kind of clicks. And instead of being right 30% of the time, you're right 80% of the time. And it's as if you're right 100% of the time because no one knows the difference. They don't, because the moment you get it wrong, you say, oh, I see that. I see why I got it wrong. And it tends to help. And the difference between a scam artist and an oracle is that the oracle is right usually 80% of the time. And when she's wrong 20% of the time, what's happening is she realizes that, okay, I'm seeing that I missed something based upon both my understanding, my reactions in my body and mind, and their reactions in their body and mind. So the 20% gets filled out intuitively based upon their cultivation. I'm throwing out percentages based upon my understanding. Obviously, the percentages may not be precise, but you get that picture. If you're able to 80-20 rule, if you're right 80% of the time, it's as if you're right all the time. Because most of the time, the vast majority of the time, they're going to be right. So we just say that 80 is like 100 in respect to these things. But in respect to scientific accuracy, yeah, usually it doesn't work that way. Usually, even anyone who's supernatural is so what's the word? Is so deviant that to be right 100% of the time is going to get them in trouble because there's not enough doubt. There always has to be some doubt in a paradigm that doesn't have a science for it. In ancient Egypt, they had a paradigm, they had a science for these things. So only when you were right 100% of the time did you get factored in. But what people don't realize is that in Egypt, there was collective paradigms in how these things worked, meaning because there was a collective paradigm and because there was a scientific standard on what causes what, if it didn't happen, there was a problem. But there is no collective standard and paradigm like that, especially in a materialistic world. So there's not going to be a science that's going to be foolproof. And that's something that people don't seem to understand either. That to find someone who's foolproof 100% of the time is going to be near impossible. And when it is possible, they found a system. Especially a system that causes the other person to survive, and they're comfortable with that particular person. So the person usually has to have 80% right all the time powers or capabilities, and then they meet a person that they're comfortable with. But not only that, they have to make money off of it. Once you make money off of it, their ego calms down and allows that paradigm to be possible consistently, whatever it is. It could be the craziest thing, or it could be psychic, which is not so crazy. It's spoken about in government, and they utilized it, and they do utilize it. And this whole thing of, well, prove to me that psychic capacity is 100% possible, and then I won't say it's BS. But then if you say it's BS, then you're dismissing a whole field of psychology, the whole Carl Jung's philosophical approach of the collective unconscious. That's what I don't like. If you say this is not right in terms of it being possible in the physical world, then you're dismissing a whole field. That's my claim. And so the way in which some people look at this is problematic. Now, is it efficient to be seeking psychic people and to be seeking them out who have 100% skills and they're right all the time and stuff like that? It's probably not efficient because it usually has to be done passively and spontaneously, unless there's a program that's funded that causes people to get money. Because then the money is going to help the people who have these abilities to hone them better, because the ego will be okay, and then the body systems will work better, and the skills will be honed better. But then you have to watch out for scammers, right? So you have to watch out for getting a really good scammer. But like what we said in the beginning of the video, the difference between the scammer is basically someone who claims that they have 100% capacity when they really have 80% or even 50%, and they learn how to BS their way. But the way I see it is that once you have 80% accuracy levels, or capabilities that you're able to utilize those skills, it's pretty much 100, and the 20% people will forgive and you'll forgive, because you'll find ways to kind of see where you got it wrong or why you got it wrong. So we covered a lot of the points that I was interested in talking about. Let's see if there's anything else that I wanted to focus on. When it comes to capacities like levitation, something that defies gravity, there have been stories of levitating with chi. And TikTok is not the place because it's a bunch of people manipulating videos. But if you find YouTube people levitating, I would take it more seriously. Because the concept of levitation has to do with mass. Mass is something that is affected by gravity. But we know that during mystical states, you lose the mass. Or mass gets fused with the fabric of the cosmos. And so it's possible that people lose their mass. But there's also an understanding of the concretization of the format of the atoms, such that a wave or a particle is relevant here. So if a person is levitating and someone sees the guy levitating and he knows it's impossible, then he'll shape the reality in such a way where the guy is not levitating. He's on a specific angle, maybe there's some strings or whatever, or maybe this or maybe that. But it'll change the reality so that it's not possible. Now, I have seen monks. This could be false, but check it out. They know how to position the chi in such a way that their body, the mass of their body is less affected by a center of gravity being on like the ankle or something. So they're able to balance just on like the ankle bone or something like that. And or even the skin between the bone, you don't want to injure yourself. And they have people on top of people. That's real. It's not levitation, but they're maneuvering the chi in such a way that the mass is affected gravity-wise. So you have people on top of people. And I don't know if circus performers also utilize this, but it'll be interesting to take a look if they learn from Eastern traditions to see how they can manipulate how the mass gets affected in their bodies. But the whole assumption, the whole proposition that you can actually levitate, turn your body into zero mass and not just center the mass in one particular area, that is something that has yet to be explored. We haven't proven that. Just because you haven't proven it doesn't make it false. But the moment you make it's true, you know what people are going to say? Oh, there's a spiritual science to it that overlaps with science. And then it's not going to be spirituality anymore. It's not going to be supernatural. Because it gets factored into mainstream. The moment it's proven, of course. And that has to do with conventional or collective understanding on what is possible and what is true. And the materialist doesn't realize that they're being affected by a collective. Once you understand spirituality, you realize collective consciousness makes up paradigms, it makes up philosophies, it makes up truth. And the main argument I have in this is that people said, wait, if you look back in time, people were... Well, first of all, they were very advanced, innovative-wise. You can't say how advanced the technology was. But the argument is, if you go back, they don't seem to have the best grasp of science. So the argument is they built structures that required mathematical precision. So to say that they didn't have a high level of understanding in physics and in math is false, and quadratics and so on. But the argument is, you go back, the laws applied to even them. They had to utilize the laws in order to achieve these things. And so my response is, maybe that is true, that you did have to utilize the laws. I have theories on that how the laws even shape up in respect to a different paradigm. Like when someone walks in and one person sees a dragon, the other person sees a person. Is the person seeing a dragon, or is he seeing a person? What's the truth? So in the everyday paradigm, the majority viewpoint is that he's not a dragon. But in the old days, when you thought animistically, sometimes they saw a person and he said it was a dragon. That's who he is. That's what he is. That's his real form, or that's his shape-shifting form. So they had a different paradigm with the sea. But what I claim is that if everyone assumed that he's a dragon, eventually the physical body would seem like a dragon. And so when they see him, they'll say he's a dragon. They'll feel the dragon. If they put him under a microscope, there'll be dragon-like cells, if they had them back then. Some say they did, depending on if you factor in genetic modifications as a possibility for the Earth narrative. Because they say that the prefrontal cortex in apes, or ape-like creatures or primitive creatures, it didn't activate until recently, very recent, like the last few hundred thousand years. And according to some, it's 3 million years. First humans were 3 million years, so I have to double check that. But 3 million years were probably around Earth, which may recontextualize this narrative. But for all intents and purposes, there is a high level of chance that the prefrontal cortex getting activated was not a fluke. It didn't just happen. Rather, it was because someone triggered it. So it's worth exploring an alternative narrative, whether or not it was genetically modified. But if it was, they probably either they had means through meditation, which we don't know about, which is like occultic. It's something to explore. I've thought about it. Or you can be more practical, and they say they had microscopes and they had ways of manipulating on the DNA level with precision, which they could see on some kind of frame. So that's worth exploring as well. But from what we grasp, they didn't have that high of technology. But there have been technologies like a type of computer from 2,000 years ago, and there have been things I've discovered that we thought were impossible or weren't going to be made, and they were made. But once you factor in the possibility of higher technologies, then you realize that, past generations probably did have something. And it's probably secret, or people just think these types of people are crazy, but crystals probably do carry consciousness. And if you utilize them in a way where you can infuse energy into them, there have been propositions that they could be used for energy. And J.P. Morgan, people have been hiding this information, was thinking about investing in people like Tesla and even crystal technology. And then he just went a different route because it was more convenient and more profitable, or more already finished. The job is already finished. The results were already showing in Edison, So J.P. Morgan was actually thinking about investing in the utilization of spinning crystals that would be infused with energy. And there are means to do this, but if you factor that in as a possibility that it could be done, and then you go back to Atlantis or something like that, where we know crystals were inherent to the culture, or some kind of storyline, then you can say that they had advanced technology. It wasn't the same technology, but it was advanced. So these are just facets. These are just ways of looking at the narrative that will cause you not to be stuck in a particular paradigm, the materialistic paradigm. Now, the reason why the materialistic paradigm is so powerful is because people already follow it. So you won't get sponsorship for things like spiritual notions that haven't been proven. And if they are proven, they're only proven in government. They're only proven in organizations that are secret or fraternities. Because if that information got out, that they're utilizing crystals in a way that we thought was not possible, then the collective paradigm would be like, hey, that's not possible. So first you have to prove that J.P. Morgan was interested for valid reasons, right? So they won't shut you down for trying to capitalize on the possibilities. That you can utilize the energy in a way that could be even more efficient than these giant things. Theoretically, we'll factor that in one day, because it doesn't seem possible to our paradigm. They'll shut you down for it. But now that the world's changing, we're thinking more innovatively and we're thinking more open-mindedly. That might change. Now, the stage green in spiral dynamics tends to be very closed-minded. They're very bound to the practical paradigm. They don't think unconventionally enough. They think in terms of what's been already established by scientists, without considering that scientists themselves are corrupt. But if they're not corrupt, they're affected by that collective paradigm, such that they don't even realize that they're corrupted. They don't even realize that they're limiting their scope of what's possible. And that's something that people don't factor in either, or if they do, they're afraid to talk about it because their sponsorship comes from those outlets. That's my take on what's happening behind the mind, whether people realize it or not. Meaning, you need to be sponsored by people who do understand that there's new age possibility, not new age. There's creative possibilities on how technology could work. And if the public knew about it, they would lose money because of the efficiency with these things. They're out there, and if you find someone who believes in that and knows it, and you pursue it yourself, he may sponsor you, or they may sponsor you. So I would go down that pathway. But once again, the reason why the scientific paradigm is so important is because it's organized and it's what people already believe in. And because you have those two things going for you, it's convenient to follow that outlet while you're pursuing unconventional outlets. So in conclusion, what you call supernatural, and what you call atypical, what you call diverging from mainstream science, it's not necessarily true. It's not necessarily true that it's diverging. It just hasn't been factored into the textbooks. Remember, I'll leave off with this. What we call magic now will eventually be considered science.